Stephen Phillips was wrongfully convicted for 10 rapes back in the 1980s, and he served 24 years in prison because of that. Now that he's out, and now that he received compensation for spending so much time in prison, his wife wants a cut. Let's take a quick look at the video with more details.
Sometimes I would get up in the morning, and I would wake up and just greet the daylight, the dawn, and it was just pretty hard. Then I'd realize I'm innocent. I'm in prison for crimes I did not commit, and there's evidence substantiating that, and I'd taken on the responsibility of that evidence and that truth, and that was actually a hopeful thing.
Now, DNA evidence proved his innocence, and as I mentioned, he spent 24 years in prison for crimes that he did not commit. He was married to his wife for a little under 2 years before he got sent to prison. They had just started a business together. They had just had a child together. And after he got incarcerated, the business fell apart. His wife visited him for about 3 years, but 10 years after he got incarcerated, they decided to divorce. Now that he's been let out, the state has granted him $6 million. However, his wife feels that she deserves a cut of that money because of the fact that he was wrongfully convicted and sent to prison. As I mentioned, their business fell apart and it impacted her financially. So a court decided to award her $150,000, but Stephen Phillips is asking them to reverse that decision. He's appealing that decision, and the question is, should she receive a cut of that money? Jody, that question goes to you. What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, California is a community property state. So I'm accustomed to thinking about couples sharing the good times and the bad, you know, and they went through some very bad times. They were struck by a bolt of lightning. The state wrongfully convicted them, and she suffered. She had his child. She visited him. She remained married to him for 10 years. He had the comfort, at least in prison, of knowing that the mother of his child was on duty, was taking care of his offspring, etc. So I don't have any problem with this, I guess. At the end of the day, I know that a lot of people want to say, oh, well, she didn't do the time. Well, in a sense, she did do the time. When you have someone in prison, as some of us know, you do the time with them. You go through the pain and suffering. It may not be the exact same pain and suffering, but it's gut-wrenching. And so I don't have only $150,000 from a $6 million settlement?
Yeah.
What percentage is that?
Now, a huge part of me feels terrible for Stephen Phillips because as soon as he gets out of prison, all of a sudden the vultures start circling. So lawyers start, asking him for money that he doesn't feel he owes them. He has already spent $300,000 on legal fees after he got out of prison, and it's a really sad story because, come on, this guy was like wrongfully convicted and lost 24 years of his life. But Bill, I want to get your thoughts on it because you seem a little more skeptical, but I could be wrong.
Well, no, I think she deserves a lot more money. I mean, her life was completely destroyed, just completely destroyed. And she took it as long as she can. Then she divorced him, and then it turns out he was innocent. And I don't think she should be suing him. I think she should be suing the penal system.
Absolutely.
Should be suing the state. On the other hand, if she really wants to, earn that money, she might be willing to go in for 8 years herself, so she can, qualify for getting half of the settlement.
Would you serve a year in prison if you got for $1 million?
Yes, I would.
For $1 million?
I go in. Where? Come take me now. $1 million?
I've heard some horror stories about prisons, man.
I'm going to take my chances. $1 million. There's no way. There's very few other sure ways of getting $1 million at the end of the year. Let's do it.
All right, Aqeela, what do you think about this? Do you think she deserves $150,000 or does she deserve more?
I think she deserves $150 plus. I do a lot of work with the organization here in the state called Californians for Safety and Justice, and we have an initiative that's specifically focused on victims and survivors of violent crime, survivors of safety and justice. And we've through our work, have really expanded the definition around who victims and survivors are seen as, because most of the time we don't automatically think of the family of the victim as suffering. I mean, they experience all of the vicarious trauma and hypervigilance that the victim has suffered as well. And I think that she should definitely receive more than what she's gotten. And I think that also she should sue the state as
Yeah.
well.
Now, one problem you point to is the more money, more problems. To go back to a rap reference, you know, Biggie, Smalls kind of.
Do you want to wrap
kind
that
of,
one
no,
too?
I think I'll leave that one alone. But there is this kind of concern that, you know, people are looking to hit the lottery at your expense using the legal system,
Right.
and that there are vultures that are going to come after somebody who has wherewithal. And if this wasn't his wife who had gone through this with him, I might feel very differently
No,
about
I think
this.
her claim is legitimate because it had an impact on her, you know. But I also think it opens up the floodgate because now, anytime there's a wrongful conviction, it's going to be looked at as far as, you know, who exactly was impacted by
Well,
that
our legal
conviction.
system handles that with
You know?
loss of consortium claims. We limit the number of people who can claim
That's right.
loss of companionship and affection. So it's typically only spouses and maybe sometimes children. Doesn't often go far beyond that nuclear group.
But
Well, good.
why hasn't this happened before? Because she I mean, I assume a lot of divorces happen with these kinds of sentences. So how? But is it unique that a conviction is overturned?
The innocence. You've proven that he was wrongfully convicted.
That's the unique part.
Exactly. Smoking gun.
Yeah.
Right.